Luck is something that just happens in cubing. People get lucky, and as a result, they get some pretty nice solve times. But sometimes luck can be very extreme and crazy things can happen. Now let's go back in time to the 2018 Rubik's Cube US National Championship. And all eyes are on the top two seeds, Felix Zemdegs and Max Park. At the moment, they are undisputedly the top two cubers in the world. Felix Zemdegs is a legendary world record holder from Australia. Many consider him to be the greatest of all time. He's consistently dominated 3x3 average rankings for 8 years. Yes, since 2010, he's consistently held the world record average and has only lost it once in 2017 to the other person here, Max Park. Max Park is world number 2, the fastest cuber in the United States, and the reigning US national champion. Having won the title in 2017, he's here to defend the US national title. It's also important to mention prior to this competition, out of the top 100 averages of all time, Felix held 43 of them and Max held 41 of them. Combined, they held 84 of the top 100 averages. Now the competition begins. Round 1 starts as somewhat expected. Max Park ended up with a 6.23 average in the top spot, proving exactly why he was one of the favorites. But there was a tiny shocker. Felix Zemdegs finished in 5th. It wasn't entirely unbelievable, as with major competitions, the pressure is high and there are a lot of top competitors, and it can be sometimes fall below expectations. With that said, round 2 things seem to be more normal. Max Park remains steady in first with a 6.44 average, and Felix Zemdegs followed closely in second with a 6.54, just 0.1 seconds behind. And this was the showdown everyone came to see. Going into semifinals now, everyone thought this rivalry would only get more spectacular. But something happened that shook the rankings and surprised everyone. To understand it, we are going to have to introduce an American speedcuber by the name of Ramy Sabahi. Ramy was one who was already well known in the community as a 2x2 expert, as a former world record holder and one of the top players in the event. But a lot of people didn't realize he was also incredibly solid at 3x3. He was 42nd in the world and 15th in the US at that time. And according to the site sheet for the competition, he was seeded 19th overall, but if you just limited it to only American competitors, he sat at 11th. With that said though, even with this ranking, people didn't really have much expectation for him when it came to 3x3. In the first round, he got an 8.46 average, which placed him 19th in the round, matching his exact rank on the site sheet. Now in the second round, he performed a bit better and got an 8.12 average, moving up to 13th on the site sheet. With that said, not too surprising. And that's because if you didn't know, site sheets are based off of best averages in competition from prior results, and with that there can be a lot of variance as some people's best prior averages can be lucky and rankings can easily shift. But with that said, now what I want to talk about is the semifinals. Because in the semifinals, some crazy stuff happened. So here's Ramy Sabahi's first solve. The start's alright, nothing crazy, pretty standard. But bam, he finishes with a time of 6.70 seconds. And he's very happy. For 2 reasons. First off, because that 6.70 second solve is a really nice solve time for him, and he's done it at such a big competition. It's faster than any single solve he has put up in the first 2 rounds of the competition. And then second comes how it happened. Most high-level Rubik's Cube solves end with a stage called PLL. Normally you have to perform one final sequence of moves to finish the cube. However, cubers do have a 1 in 72 chance of getting a PLL skip, which skips this final set of moves. Unlikely, but still within reason, especially for such a big competition. There was going to be a lot of people bound to get a PLL skip. But now comes the next solve. So Ramy sits down for a second solve, and he's already riding the high of the 6.70, and he just needs to stay steady and calm. The solve itself starts pretty normal for him, Nothing crazy good or bad, just an average solve, but boom! He stops the timer and finishes with a time of 6.63 seconds. Now that's even faster than his first solve. Well, how did he do that if his solve was pretty normal? Well, the answer is that he did it again. Against all odds, Ramy hit his second PLO skip in a row. To put that into perspective, how unlikely this is, getting one PLO skip, as I stated earlier, is 1 in 72. To get two of them back to back in a competition, you have to multiply those odds. It's a 1 in 5,184 chance. And this is all happening at a major championship. Now, if you remember, as I talked about earlier in the second round of the competition, Max Park ended up first with a 6.44 average, and Felix Semdegs ended up second with a 6.54 average. These two solves, although are slower, they're very close to those times. In fact, to put this better into perspective, let's take a look at third place in the second round, which was Kian Mansour, who ended up with a 7.43 second average. So things are looking insane. Now comes the third solve. Unfortunately, there's no footage of this solve as it was lost, but he ended up getting a pretty good solve time, and it ended up with a 6.66. So now if we look at his results, all three of the solves he's done so far are under 7 seconds. Absolutely wild. Now for those who don't know, in cubing, an average is calculated by taking 5 solves, removing the worst and the best, and taking a mean of the middle 3. Now why do I explain this? Well, because he's already had 3 very good solves, meaning that he can mess up one, and the average would still be pretty good. But it's important to remind yourself that this is a major competition. It's a high stakes environment with a lot of pressure. And during this time, having 3 solves under 7 seconds is insane, because not very many cubers have even done anything like this. But that doesn't necessarily make it easier. Plenty of speed cubers have had great starts to averages, but have fumbled or choked in the past. Now it's also important to remind ourselves that Ramy was ranked 19th on the psych sheet. The reason I mentioned this is because in order to make the finals, you have to be top 16 in the semifinals. And at the end of the day, that was probably one of his goals, to try to make 3x3 finals. But now he was looking at more than just making the cut. He was on pace to be one of the top seeds entering the finals. So, with that said, what happened next could only be explained by, simply just more luck. He started the fourth solve, and it was pretty solid. Nothing crazy, but then, bam. He stops the timer at 6.27 seconds. You know how he already got 2 PLO skips? Well, he just got a third. In 4 solves, Ramy had 3 PLO skips. And if we do the math, that is a 1 in 94,626 chance. At this point, you can calculate 2 things: BPA, best possible average, and WPA, worst possible average. Because he's already had 4 really solid solve times, his worst possible average was a 6.66. No matter what happened to the last solve, his average couldn't be worse than that. On the other hand, his best possible average was a 6.50, although he would have to tie or beat his 6.27 to actually achieve it. With that said, either way, no matter what happens, doesn't matter what result he gets, he's in for a good average. Anyways, unfortunately, he did DNF his last solve. There's no footage, but with that DNF being discarded as his worst time, he officially finished with an average of 6.66, worst possible average. And this is absolutely insane. And to understand why that is the case, we're going to be taking a look at 2 things. First off, Ramy's previous personal average. Ramy's previous personal record average was 7.31. And at a high level, jumping from 7.3 to a 6.6 is a massive leap. The kind of improvement that's not very easily seen, and especially to do it at a competition of such a high level. People usually at competitions like these don't solve as well. So to see a jump like that is absolutely insane. And now with that said comes the next thing, which is the leaderboard. When the results were finalized, the leaderboard looked like a mistake. Felix Zemdegs had come into first place, and Max Park had fallen to fourth, and in second place was Ramy Sabahi. But here's the thing I do have to mention. As I mentioned earlier at the start, Felix is an Australian cuber. So while Ramy was second in the round, if you only count American cubers, he was the top American seed heading into the finals. Think about that. The 19th seed, who had a 7.31 personal record average just an hour ago, was now the highest ranked American in the United States going into the Nationals finals. Now headed into the finals, things did get a bit normal. He was the very final matchup, and he was matched up against Felix Zemdegs, which is really high pressure. And the statistical madness of the semifinals came to an end, and Ramy ended up with an 8.25 average, which placed him 11th overall and 5th among all American competitors. With that said, this is definitely still probably higher than he expected. Now I do want to mention, while that 3x3 miracle was definitely one of the main stories of the weekend, Ramy didn't leave empty-handed. In the same weekend, he took home the national title in 2x2, winning the competition. And now as for that legendary rivalry we started with, well, the finals was indeed exciting at the end. Felix Zemdegs was able to win, and Max Park placed second, successfully defending his title as U.S. national champion. Now, regardless of who took that trophy, this will always be one of the craziest things to have happened in that competition. The 1 in 94,000 miracle that put Ramy Sabahi right in the middle of the spotlight in one of the largest cubing competitions in cubing history.